Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna jump in with Peter giving us an update on the 30% design status, and then we'll jump in with JB talking about the ordinance with both of those two major tasks, keeping in mind that we are giving the select board both of those products either at their next meeting, which is next Wednesday, which is a day after our our second meeting this month on the 7th, which is a Tuesday, and the select board meets on a Wednesday next week, or the following meeting. So Linda needs to, if it's going to be on Wednesday, Linda has to get that agenda out tomorrow. So we have to keep that in mind as we're working on both of those topics today,
So
especially
did they meet
the
the
ordinance.
8th and then the 22nd, or the 8th and the Linda, are you meeting every other week or every week in January?
Well, because our first meeting was yesterday, we rescheduled it to the 8th, and so we'll meet on the 8th and the 15th.
And the 15th, okay.
Thought we, okay, I wasn't sure if I had my audio off. I thought we decided, Linda, that you weren't able to review anything this month. Am I remembering that wrong, or?
Could you say that again, Peter? Sorry, the dog is barking.
Oh, I was just trying to remember. I
yeah,
thought Linda and the select board were knee deep in the budget stuff, and that they had requested first meeting in February, but
I would prefer that.
That's what I had remembered, just sketchy, but I had thought we were possible presentation was first February meeting. But
Linda, that's what you had mentioned to me in an email.
Yeah,
I mentioned, yeah, I mentioned I'm going to be out of town for the second select board meeting anyway.
I'd prefer to meet February 5th.
The 5th is that next select board meeting?
That's two away. But if you want to come in January, you can.
Well, it's more going to be dictated by, are we ready?
I would think next week's would be pretty challenging if you're out of town for the second one, Jim. Seems to me first in February makes sense, but
Okay. All right. So Peter, do you want to begin?
sure. We met with Rob from Oakson this morning. We're kind of working on some final layout stuff for the disposal area, and doing various back and forths on the plans. Hoping to get them out to you by the end of the day tomorrow, so folks can ideally look over them over the weekend before we meet on Tuesday. But we're kind of scrambling with the holidays and everything, so we'll definitely try to get them out at least a day in advance for you.
Pete, are you saying, Peter, you're going to have the 30% design by then?
Yeah, yes, because we're meeting to talk about them, so I'll try to get them out so everyone can peruse them, and then I'll give a rundown on Tuesday of how the plans are coming and kind of go through them with you folks.
Great. So, because that'll be our last meeting Tuesday before the February 6th select board meeting, or 5th
Right.
select
Yeah.
board meeting. Right. Yeah, that would be great, Peter. And just in general, how are things going, and any updates on permitting or V-Trans work related to the bridge or anything like that?
I think there was a lot more back and forth with V-Trans than I was well, I shouldn't say I was expecting, but I mean, there was just a lot of back and forth and a lot of last minute changes to specs and stuff. But I think we're all set. I got an email from Bob today saying that I think they're shooting to get it out in the 22nd this month. So I have to give a closer look at that email if there's any final requests, but I think it's all coming together. And
Anything on the permitting side?
not other than, especially now that we're getting through the 30% design, we're gonna start focusing on a lot of the environmental review stuff. So no real updates, other than we've been focused on the 30% designs.
And Linda, well, keeping in mind for both Peter and JB on the ordinance, what do you think the select board would like to see from the committee for the February 5th meeting? Are they looking for a presentation? We're going to submit those two documents to the select board ahead of the meeting for the select board members to review, and then they're looking for a presentation from one or more of us on the 5th. What's the expectation for the select board meeting on the 5th relative to what they want from us?
Well, why don't I ask them on the 8th what their expectation is? Ask them whether they want to see the 30% design or not. Or if they just want a summary of it. Aren't you getting ready to have them take a look at the ordinance? Are we not there yet?
Yeah, well, my question is for both the 30% design and the ordinance. What would the select board, do they want a presentation from us? And get the material a week or two before the select board meeting and then have us present, or they just want to review the two documents, the design and the ordinance on their own? I'm not sure what the select board wants.
Can I offer a couple thoughts from historic doing this more than
Sure.
it might be that the ordinance generally takes a lot more digesting than the drawings. And it might be that we even want to sort of workshop the ordinance with them, even like a special meeting online before, if they're willing to do that, or some sort of work session, so that the worst possible thing is they get hit with both on the 5th and they've just barely opened the ordinance to read through it, because there's always questions. So I would say, depending on how, for the ordinance side, depending on how we do today, the sooner they get it, the better. But I would really recommend that it not be like, hi, I'm the 35-page ordinance and the 35% drawing, the 30% drawing at the same meeting.
Well, can
That'd
we,
be a lot.
given what Peter said, that he's essentially they're going to have the 30% design in a few days, can we, and it's not going to take as much review for the select board, Linda, that might take away from the budget, could we maybe fast track the 30% design to the select board first, and then do the ordinance for the meeting on, send that to them ahead, but have the presentation on the 5th? If the select board wants a presentation
For the
for
design?
the ordinance?
So the ordinance, they need to be able to have the opportunity to read it.
Yes.
We need to be there to present it. If they just do it, they're really apt to start pulling it apart. We need committee members there to hold them back and really support our decisions. It's harder for them to say no when they're looking at you in the face.
Yeah.
So and doing the workshop thing is not too bad of an idea of having, it has to be open to the public. But,
Sure. 100%.
You know,
At a select board meeting or a separate meeting?
we could have it at a separate meeting.
I think
To
that
go over.
might be a really good idea. Um, and I've got good reason to make a trip. My big complication is I can't be in Vermont on the 5th of February, but we could do like a work session where we're all in a room beforehand. And then maybe the committee's there and I'm online on the 5th and we sort of go through, okay, remember we reviewed this, These are the broad outlines. These are things that are going to wait. That, Jim, that feels to me like gives us our best chance of success. And then Pete, if we're able to really like workshop the ordinance beforehand, and then it's okay, yeah, we're reviewing something we've already seen, the committee's there. And then Pete, I think it's less mission critical when they get the plans. It could be your January meeting, it could be January and a refresher course on the 5th.
That'll make sense to me.
And then we can get, if we're working on the ordinance today and next Tuesday, JB, and you make some changes, we could give them a couple of weeks
Absolutely.
notice
And
to
yeah,
review
and
it.
pick a good day to review it. And I mean, Westford, okay, we don't talk about Westford, but Westford Select Board. Seth, what did we have? 3 2-hour sessions or something?
Yes.
I
Though
think, though,
distinction is we
again,
have Linda and Alan on the select board and
correct.
this committee. But yes, I think we should plan for probably that work session and then
Yeah.
a select board meeting, and decoupling that from the plan presentation, I think is a good idea.
Yeah.
I think if the two happen at the same meeting, we probably won't actually get to the plan review.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do also think having members of the committee there, like Linda said, would be really important, so that you can be answering questions about why you came to the decisions that you did, and the background.
Okay, well, we could figure this out maybe before our next, or at our next Tuesday's meeting, as far as when the 30% design would get sent to the select board and how much of a presentation they want. Linda can maybe ask at the next select board meeting, and then for the ordinance, if we're gonna have a special workshop, when that would be. But hopefully we can take care of that at our next meeting and after Linda talks to the select board. All right. So Peter, sorry, did you have any other updates that you wanted to share?
No, I don't think I have anything else at this point.
And Peter, did you have a chance to talk with JB? I know you guys were going to talk offline relative to the ordinance. Did you guys have a chance to do that?
I've been really offline for a couple of weeks, among other things, dealing with an injury. So that's on me. But what we're gonna need, the main thing we're gonna need is the expected connections and this on expected flows, because it's really going to affect the rate, as we'll look at today, for how that gets allocated among town and non-flat fee residential payers.
Yeah, I have a pretty good spreadsheet that I can
Okay.
share in this meeting if folks want specifics. And or I can just send along, and the gist of it is I think, we're gonna have to scale things. We definitely, between the buyouts and some of the no's or maybe no's, there's a good chunk of capacity that starts knocking us down, probably in the 10,000 to 12,000 gallon per day range as like people we know and properties we know are going to be hooked up. So,
And then that could be related to the capacity, the town reserve capacity question of whether or not we need the 20%. That I know you highlighted, JB, in
Well,
the ordinance.
it's that, and it's really about revenue. The system is going to have a cost each year that's not, in your case, with with a small system, your costs are not variable. They're going to be pretty much, you're going to have a maintenance contract that has to happen. You'll make a choice, select board or the board of wastewater commissioners, duly renamed, is going to make a choice about how much reserve you want to put away. And you're going to have to cover that cost. If residential is fixed, if we've given them a flat fee per month, that nugget of revenue is a known thing. And the rest of the cost is non-residential and town. Those are the only places to recover those operating costs. So it's just a matter of, balancing out how that cost gets allocated. Because if it all goes on the non-residential ratepayers, it's going to be rough. If it goes on the grant, we can look at what it would represent on the grand list for the town to basically support some of the cost of the system in the form of uncommitted reserve capacity.
So then JB, in the spreadsheet, option 1, 2, and 3, that's option 3, right?
Yeah, it's option 3, or we can come up with an option 4. It's just a matter of, if you don't, Pete, this is ancient flow data. This is at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16,000-ish. It's a matter of how many, knowing how much revenue you're going to get from your residential customers. So the residential, if it's fixed, is low, as far as I know, from terms of the number of customers. And that means you got to make up that money from either the municipal side or the non-residential, non-municipal buildings. So there are different ways we can deal with it, but we do need to know the number of units, where we want to start with the fixed cost for, studio 1, 2, and then 3 bedroom. But if the people on a fixed charge are only bringing in 23 grand a year, you got to make up the other 50 from somewhere.
What I think we discussed this a little bit at the last meeting, JB, that we, I don't want to speak for everyone here on the commission, but it was my understanding that we wanted to stick with what we essentially were advocating in all the meetings about what the cost would be, which would be either option 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like option 1 is not really an option. We were essentially, that would be a brand new shocking number to some.
Right. And again, I need fresh numbers on this from Pete and Amy to make sure that we have the right, but if people are with the buyouts and such, the number that may have to go on, either on the grand list and or the non-residential ratepayers is going to get bigger.
But the option 3, even if the town grand list paid for the reserve fund,
Mm-hmm.
it is looking at the per 100, 200, 300,000 assessed value. Those numbers, in my mind, are still very low.
Those are very low, but look at the number for the store. That's the problem.
Which
If
is the store
you-
number? Which is the store number, JB?
2366 a month. Or I beg your pardon, no, that should be
That's-
divided by 12. That's divided by 12.
So just a question. I know we've
Yeah,
we've
they go way up.
you know, we've during the public
Oh, divided by-
meetings really did kind of give that fixed residential rate. Does the ordinance have to specify the non-residential fee, like dollar value, or just the process by which it's established?
Not the dollar value. It just has to specify the process, and that's how I've drafted it.
Okay, because
But
that's going to
yeah.
change every
Yeah,
right. That's going to change every
it'll
year.
change every year.
I-
Yeah.
Thought just that we were thinking before the buyout math and before the what appears to be a potential increase in available capacity because of the quality of the soils. We had been thinking we were going to be pretty limited on what a reserve could look like. When we look at the town allocation, and you may have already done this, Peter, so if I'm like 6 months behind reality, let me know. But the discussions now that are really real related to rehab of the schoolhouse, some of the alternatives for that would be fairly high wastewater demand uses. And so it may make sense to include that up front in the municipal allocation so the town isn't in a situation so that it's permitted with ANR, to go forward, and at least that piece of that whole process is taken care of now. And I do wonder if some of the businesses, non-residential users, we were kind of maybe being fairly judicious in their allocations based on the limits of the system, that maybe it's worth revisiting sort of long-term plans with some of them. And it's possible their initial allocations might be higher and their needs might be higher in terms of connecting infrastructure if they know there's capacity available. That might help this discussion.
Especially the MSI buildings.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think our MSI allocation was something like 1,000 gallons per day, which for complexes with as many buildings as they have, that's not a lot, really.
Yeah.
I've been wondering the same thing, Seth, like, how are we going to get folks to commit to what they are probably going to want in this, say, next 5 years versus just like saying, okay, you only have to sign up for what you want now. And from a design perspective, that's going to be a little bit problematic too, because we can't put in a 1,000-gallon,
Step tank.
step tank and then
Yeah.
find out
Pull it
2
out,
years from now that
put it
they
in
actually
there.
want 5 times that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we can, it's just going to cost them a lot more money.
So that discussion would be with the store, really, with MSI, with other big potential users.
Well, one of the ones we noted in our spreadsheets was the Nazarene Church. Like, does anyone know where they stand? Because we were projecting at one point a bunch of housing in there or something.
I know who to talk to because ironically, there's a connection to Point Loma here. The head of the new, one of the people who's very involved, Reverend Mann, is up in Johnson, and I think they're just hoping to sell the property as soon as possible. So it would really be,
What do you
it's
mean
really
it
going to
is
be,
sold? It is
it is
sold.
sold.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I was wondering. Right.
It's actually sold to someone who lives in California.
Do you know the name, Linda?
Colleen Gorman.
Huh. No, that's not part of
I-
the crew anyway.
I
Um,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead, Seth.
I was going to say that I do have a fairly good working relationship with Jim Mahoney and Garrett Hershak from MSI. So if it would
Call him up.
make sense to call them up and try to organize a meeting with Stone to talk about their allocation, I mean, to me, with the number of buildings, if they're less than 3 to 5,000 gallons per day, doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
But
No, I agree. And one, the incentive for them is that they're gonna get the infrastructure that they need now instead of paying for it themselves later. But
Right.
the downfall is they're gonna start,
paying for
they're gonna have
it.
to commit and pay for it,
Yeah.
you know, as soon as the bills start getting sent out.
Can I ask you what the Wolcott Village store encompasses? Does that encompass the 7 apartments?
I'm
Or is that
looking at our
just the
spreadsheet
store?
and we've combined them together, yes.
217 gallons per day. That seems pretty low.
So they have 7
Well,
apartments.
that
Uh,
excluded the apartments. I
Right.
had the apartments separately because they would presumably be at a flat rate.
different rate, right?
Yeah. So I had them pulled out. I had 6 apartments. Are there 7?
I believe there's 7.
Okay.
And then the building next door they own has commercial down below, but I think 3 apartments above.
And those are right now they're tied into one septic, Linda,
Yes, yes.
and they're pumping it out once a month.
Oof.
I think
Oh,
more
that's expensive.
sooner than that.
So that's why I was wondering if that $197 a month doesn't seem so high to me,
No,
Given-
it
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah.
given what they're doing
That's
now.
what I say.
Well,
Yeah.
it's that for just the store plus the fee for each apartment. So 7 times. So it's more than that, but my God, if they're pumping that often, they're going to be delighted. So,
And the people that lease the store want to expand and they can't.
So, so we're gonna need some updated numbers, but maybe some
Yep.
conversations with the owners of the Nazarene Church and with MSI to see if they want some more capacity. It's sounds like at
Sounds like the
1,000
store too.
and the store at 1,000 gallons per day for MSI seems, as Seth was saying, pretty low. And we have a 10,000 gallon surplus now. We're more than that, Peter.
That's a complicated question. We have at least, yes, we have more than a 10,000 gallon per day surplus. That if you add up all of the flows and you don't sort of discount it for Julie Beth's like accounting of like one or 2 bedroom apartments, which gets different flows. It gets pretty complicated if you're looking at design flows as we look at it with the state versus how we're talking about charging folks. So if you total everything up, we're at 18,700 gallons per day with sort of with our flows.
Is that before the buyouts or after the buyouts?
No, that's with the buyouts. So the buyouts are 1,200 off of that. And then, we know there's going to be some folks that either going to opt out or it might not be worth the town's battle with them to get them connected and paying. So, it starts getting knocked down quite a bit. I guess I'm curious how you guys want me to share this all with you, what I have, but I don't think there's any shortage of capacity.
I guess the context for my question was if Seth is going to have some conversations with MSI and someone else was going to have a conversation with Colleen, the owner of the Nazarene Church, about what their build out options are in the future relative to the gallons per day. Like how much do we want to be able to offer them
Yeah,
I think what makes sense and how I would plan to approach Garrett and Jim would be, what reasonably do you think you would like to be able to do with these buildings? And hear what they would like to be able to do from a business standpoint and a development standpoint, and then back into the wastewater, because you all know you've spent several years converting things to gallons per day. It's a funny kind of math. But I think that you can probably start at an aspirational point with the store based on the capacity that you have. And that's probably a good thing to be able to do. Um, if they're thinking they want to be able to have seats, you will have enough capacity for a fair number of seats, for example. If they're thinking, they tell you they want to start brewing beer, we have to have a different conversation. But it would be good to know if they do tell you that.
So Seth, are you saying that the little bit over 200 gallons per day that was on the spreadsheet for the store without the apartments, that they would still be able to expand and have some seats with that amount, or
The
they would
No.
need more capacity?
I think the 217 is pretty much today,
Right,
Peter.
okay.
If they want to
yeah,
have,
that's really low for any
That's
sort
low.
of,
it's
I mean,
It's
it's
That's pretty
not
much
horrible
just
for like
retail.
a deli. Delis don't need a ton
Right.
of wastewater, but if you want seats or
Yeah.
more,
It's probably
Little
like the
takeout.
VG and Waitsfield's level of retail. It's basically a retail allocation, not food prep.
Right.
So
the seats. What I think, kind of the opposite, Jim, is they're very limited by their current allocation. They can't really expand. But you have enough capacity in the system where if they think they wanted to do things like expand to add seating in the next 5 years, this would be a good time to know that and allocate that, because all of the infrastructure needed for a bigger tank, potentially all of the permitting with ANR needed to do a bigger allocation, can happen as part of this project. So if they think that's a reasonable thing they'd like to do in the
Right.
next 5 years, this would be a very good time to kind of
and
box it in.
it's a huge benefit to them to get, a tank in at no cost right now during the construction phase. That's really big economic development boost for them.
So
So
it sounds like we need to have conversations with the Nazarene Church, with the store, with
well, yeah, it sounds like the
MSI.
new owner, Linda. I don't do you have anything besides like a name and address? I
For
can
what?
for the
what?
woman who bought the Nazarene property.
I have a phone number and email.
Okay. So if she got a friendly email, probably Seth or Jim or both of you just saying we'd love to have a conversation. I'm happy to help if you think I can. Um, we're great. Welcome to Wolcott, and there's going to be a great opportunity if you're thinking about development options um, for the site.
And I'd love to also share with them information about the village center tax credits if they're thinking about an
Absolutely.
expansion of some sort at the same time. Give
So
them-
that she did write
My
a
God,
letter,
she's here.
agreed to a letter of support for our community development grant.
She lives in San Diego. I can
Yep,
pretty much throw a
Lovely.
rock and hit her office. Yeah.
Well, it seems like we should be having these conversations sooner rather than later, right?
yeah,
Absolutely.
yes, I think for us, it'll make our work a lot easier if we start to iron some of those out. And certainly for trying to figure out how these things get paid for, will be helpful too.
And can we circle back to how would this relate to the reserve capacity? If I'm calculating about 6,000 gallons,
Well,
is that?
it's going to go into what we need to look at is who's going to be paying how much per month and what share of that pie ends up being a town expense. because that's going to tell us how much has to go on the grand list. And I don't think it's going to be bad. So, we're going to take what we think is the capacity, Pete. We're going to subtract what the residential and figure out what their revenue is. And then we're going to say, what do people want to reserve for non-residential? Okay, what does that revenue look like? Because that will have to be on a per gallon basis. So it goes into our rate analysis because we're proposing to charge a flat rate for residential units and then a per gallon charge for everything else. So we got to figure out what that per gallon charge is. And for that, we really need to know how many gallons are people reserving versus what's the town going to end up sort of holding. And once we have some numbers, it's easy to get to that point. It's easy to get that answer.
So just kind of backing up for just a second, I think two things that, this impacts kind of the final numbers. It may not have as much impact on the actual policy in the ordinance other than
Correct.
the amount that the town reserves.
Correct.
And then it also gets to, so I think, Jim, you're right, it does have to happen soon. But getting your heads around the policy, is an important, and the select board's heads around the policy is something I think can still start happening. The other thing I think this will impact is your policies for future allocations, how you pay for them, and whether or not you grant a waiver, because that process, or waivers for connection fees, because that process is how the town kind of recoups some of these costs as new users come online. So that's another important thing to keep in mind. There's sort of the annual cost of operation, and then there's the building and recouping the costs to the town. So when we get to that point of talking about, what your connection policy might be, keep this discussion in mind too, because they're
Right.
connected.
And just while we're thinking about who we need to reach out to, so I'm thinking of potential businesses that may want to expand in the future. How are we leaving the old schoolhouse? Because we're not quite sure what's going to be there. I know we have the proposal as potentially a cafe and a historical society. What if they
Mhm.
decide they want to have a bar? It could, now that we have extra capacity, that could be an option.
Mhm.
The
Um,
planner in me would say look at the kind of full build out plan and the most kind of ambitious plan and make sure the town has that available. But the planner in me is not the one who has to pass town budgets. So I would say that to the select board and see where they landed with the financial reality of that. But I think have we shared those plans with the Stone team for kind of the more ambitious use of the building? So we should do
No, I
that.
don't feel like I've seen anything yet.
And,
So
what's the Cliff Notes version of the more ambitious plan, Seth?
Cafe with a kitchen and historical society space.
Okay, I knew about that.
Yep.
There's not something more than that.
no, but it's in the works. We've created a village trust. And it's not gonna be run by the town.
Right.
Um,
Sort of the model from Rupert, right, Seth?
We have
that
a
would-
big grant with Preservation Trust in rural Vermont who are helping us find some of the funding and helping us with all the technical support right now.
yeah.
And any other municipal buildings, Linda, that we should consider more usage than there is now, other than the schoolhouse?
Well, down the road, we should consider maybe having some, bathrooms for rail trail users. They don't
Yes.
seem to like the portalet, and, town employees don't like them using their bathrooms.
And who can blame them?
No, and the library doesn't like it either.
Does anybody know roughly the gallons per day of like the bathrooms they have at the Oxbow in Morrisville, for example, the two?
What's the typical for that? Isn't it like 300 GPD per stall or something? I actually should know
It's-
this because of a project
It's
I'm working
no,
on
it's
here.
not that easy. It's,
It's-
you're trying to figure out the number
Yeah.
of visitors and users. 300 seems relatively reasonable.
Per stall. Is that what you said,
Well,
JB?
I mean, you're trying to figure out how many people are going through there in a day and what the
Yeah.
potential is. So, like, yeah, I don't know
We're
that I have a
doing-
great answer for everybody right now, but I
We've
can
been
dig
we've been
into a
doing
little.
some stuff on sanitation for outdoor recreation here that I've been involved in. We're using 300, but it's so variable.
Yep.
It's incredibly variable, and it's hard to know what the state would ultimately require. I think it would ultimately probably be like a negotiated number based on
Yeah,
some kind of peak, but it's not going to be a ton, but you'll have it. You'll have the capacity. So
So it's a little bit more than what the store is currently using.
yeah, that's probably about right.
And obviously, we're going to be a lot lower volume than Morrisville public bathroom, and they have the Oxbow Festival and
You know, it'd be really
concerts and-
interesting is if they've got a meter anywhere in their system that would give us an estimate from the Oxbow. That would be your absolute best comparable.
yeah.
Or I'm trying to think, is there a trailhead anywhere in Stowe?
So
Well, you
Barnes
got the
Camp-
public bathrooms and you've got Barnes Camp, but you got the public bathrooms in Stowe, which are probably vastly oversubscribed and they're probably not
What about
separately metered.
Danville? Weren't they putting,
Mm.
bathrooms in? They got that vortex.
Yes,
do that.
that's a good idea, Linda.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if they've completed it.
Seth, what did Barnes Camp end up with? Are they doing composting up there?
They
Yeah.
they have a composting system and it was
Okay.
sized based on the assumption of 200 visitors per day.
Okay.
It doesn't have a gallon per day
No, because there's
conversion,
no
obviously.
water. Yeah.
But I think that Danville, if you kind of look at Danville and then what their gallons per day and put that in your calculation would be my suggestion. I think Linda's
I
got
think that's a really good idea.
Before we move on, so can we assign people here that are going to talk to try to get some of these numbers? So Colleen, Seth, you said MSI.
Yep.
JB, were you going to reach out to Colleen or Linda?
I think
Because you
if I whatever the pleasure of the group, she is literally right in my neighborhood, and I know the folks from the Nazarenes, so I'd be happy to. Might be a little less random. Linda,
Yeah.
if you can send me that info, and I'm happy to.
will.
the store, well, right now the Martins still own the store, but they're leasing out they still own the building, but they're leasing out the store, right? So do we want to talk to Fred or do we want to talk to the new potential owners, or probably have a conversation with both, right?
Yeah, I think it will more be based on the new owners. They'll probably end up being the one that pay, but yeah.
But that's not a done deal, right?
What?
The building transferring ownership, that's something down the road as a possibility, right?
I don't
They're
know.
just they're just
They're
leasing it now.
leasing it. I don't know whether they ever had any intentions of buying the building or not. They don't really
So-
want the apartments. They just want to lease the space for the store,
So we should be talking to Fred then.
whatever. Fred doesn't really talk to me.
I called Fred like 10 times during
Yeah.
the feasibility study and he never returned the call. So if
Wow.
those folks are talking to the town, I think you want to talk to those folks.
And what's Fred's wife's name?
Sally.
Sally? She seems more approachable, right?
Yeah, I could talk to Sally, but all she ever says is, well, I'll talk to Fred.
Yeah. And I can understand, you know, the demands on Fred and deferring to the
Well,
least.
Fred just has a
Yeah.
axe to grind with Wolcott's political government, which I'm part of.
So Linda, do you have a connection with the owners of that are leasing the store?
I have no idea who they are. Bruce has talked to him a number of times, but I don't know. Now,
Bruce
Bruce
has
is
talked
gonna
to him.
want to be putting some flows in his 2 lots.
I
And he
was
just
thinking the same
And he
thing.
just bought, the building next to the town hall, the former town clerk's office he just bought. So it's worth finding out what his plan is with that.
Mhm.
I believe Amy had a conversation with the store leasee following one of the meetings. Where they expressed interest in capacity, so I can ask her about that a little more.
Okay, so so we have JB contacting Colleen
Yep.
with Linda's
Just
giving
need
the
the info.
contact information. Seth contacting the MSI folks, Jared and Jim. So it's maybe we'll talk, maybe Amy talking to the store leasers, and then talking to Bruce when he's able about his intentions for his buildings. Do we miss anybody? Should we somehow advertise, like say, tell us what your future plans are for anyone in the village, or do we not want to go there? We're just kind of handpicking some people here.
I think the handpicking for now is probably fine, and but I do think, like, not too distant future, we're gonna have to come up with a strategy for starting to firm things up with folks and having more conversations. So I think figuring out some of these key properties in the short term in this way is probably a good way to get at it.
Okay. And Seth, what you were calling the latest iteration for the schoolhouse, is that what we have right now allocated, Peter, or this is a new use for you?
I believe that will be a new use. I don't think we had anything in there for that, but I'd have to dig into the numbers, kind of have it lumped by category.
Is there any way we can, everyone that was assigned a contact, is there any way we could do that before Tuesday? At least making a preliminary phone call?
We can at least make a phone call. Can't guarantee anybody will pay attention between now and next Tuesday, but we can sure, at least for me, I can rattle a cage. That's no problem.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I'm not gonna commit Amy for reaching out to
Yeah,
the
she's
store
not back
before
till Monday.
Tuesday. Yeah.
Do you know what the name of the leasers are, Linda?
No, I've never met him, nothing.
Okay.
Give Bruce a call. I'm sure he's well enough to talk. So I just sent you the contact information I had.
Got it, Linda. Thank you.
All right. So we got a little way late here, but I think that this is a very helpful conversation. JB, do we want to put up the highlighted portions
You
of the
betcha.
ordinance?
Brace yourselves, everybody. Here it comes. All right. Okay, so I took a really thorough read through the whole thing here. And hopefully, oh goodness, I love it when we get a bad header in the table of contents. Hopefully, I really feel like this is ready for working through with the select board. Linda, it's going to be up to the board what you want to do for legal review. It's always a good idea.
Yeah,
And that, especially since it's not, your attorney is not someone who does a ton of these like Stitzel's office does, maybe sooner than later, just so we work through any questions that they have. Okay,
Linda,
board
one other
is,
thing that
yes,
I failed kind of to bring up or mention, but if you're talking to your attorney anyway, is we're in not too long from now, we're going to need to be developing easements
yes.
for each of these properties. Like pretty much we got 2025 to make this all happen. So, there's quite a bit of legal paperwork that's going to have to be done and coordinated.
I have Waitsfield's easements for like the big picture system, if that's at all helpful.
Yeah, that could be probably.
so what I've done, our attorney has done numerous easements for me, working
Okay,
on
great.
bridges, but he's a little difficult. He likes a map or something. He needs dimensions or something. He's not just gonna write an easement. It's gotta have to,
Yeah, I suspect our plans will be good enough for him, and he can probably start drafting some of that language without the specifics. And then as our plans start to get finalized, and I would imagine he'd be able to reference those and show the easements on those plans.
yeah, that's what
Emily has a
he'll
hand
want
up.
that.
Emily has,
Yeah, and this is also something that you'll, Peter and Amy are gonna wanna review with, Ashwag and us to make sure there's no variances needed for those
Yeah.
well shields. So that's some pre-work, I think, for Peter and Amy, but also once they're ready to have us look at those things, we can take a look and we can meet with them to do that, because you'll need to do that before you start doing that. Like what I call the hard copy, the maps is what Linda said, but that's what a lot of the other villages are doing as well.
all right. So the board has been renamed the Board of Wastewater Commissioners. If you want to be the Flying Purple People Eaters or anything else, speak now and we'll drop it right in there. But you are now the board, as you know, the Board of Wastewater Commissioners is appointed by the Select Board. Use your bylaws for it. They are comprised as the Sewage Disposal Board under the state law. Emily, since you're on, I want to make sure this is a definition of failed system that Mary Clark and I have been using in the Benighted APA wastewater project. I really like it. It's a good, I think it's as decent and objective standard as you can get for if you have one of the people who are not connecting now and are not getting bought out, and in the future you get one of these conditions, that's when they can be compelled to connect. So that's a definition, just to make note of that. That's why it's got a little highlight on it. Okay, the rest of this is all the same stuff. I did change superintendent to be a duly authorized agent of the town, so it doesn't have to be a town employee, since your staff is small. You may delegate that to Pete or another engineer or a system operator. This is again the Board of Wastewater Commissioners, just making sure you have that title. Fun abbreviations. I love chemistry. Okay. And then again, I think this is the last little bit on the board. The select board is going to organize and appoint the Board of Wastewater Commissioners. So it doesn't have to be the select board. You get to incorporate it by resolution. And those will be the folks who are the board from here on out. Okay. All right, everybody, this is our private, this is the who gets to opt out. So this, again, we really want to make sure that we're good with. And I've written it as an A or B. So you can opt out if you meet all the criteria under A, or if you meet both of the criteria under B. That should not have a period there. So A is basically
So whose mapped area is it? Is it FEMA or the state of Vermont? Because there seems to be more than one flood map out there.
well, FEMA is the authority for floodplain and the state is for river corridors.
So we use FEMA's maps for the 100, 500, and then there's the state created their own river corridor.
Correct. My only, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, Emily, have you seen this latest version?
I'll be honest, I have not seen the latest version.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you mind giving it a quick look here? I know you want to maybe sit with it for a little bit, but for A and B.
Could you forward me that part?
Yep. Okay, and I'm flagging this one because I think the idea of this was either you've got a site, this is A, where, and I think 2 needs to be strike out now that I look at it. The idea was you've got a site where your structure and the wastewater system are outside the 500-year floodplain in the river corridor, and it's never failed, and you can support a fully compliant replacement system.
Or you get a permit.
Or,
Yeah,
or the system was constructed after September 2007 and has never failed.
well, you could have an or up above too, where you actually get the permit or have the permit and just haven't built it yet.
Okay, so this is an or. That
but I
needed to be an
guess,
or. That's the issue was.
Sorry, Julie Beth, let me just trying to think of it, if there's really a scenario like that, because it would only be an undeveloped lot where you would have a permit that you haven't built, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there isn't really a scenario like that.
I think we just quit this
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Yep.
That's it. That's what we were hoping for. And Emily, this is where the definition of failed is so important because, well, my system's never failed. Okay, well, did it backed up into your house.
I guess
Okay.
my only one question to everybody is the way this is written right here is that you have to have a designer or professional engineer look at your property and test that you have both a fully compliant replacement system and then a replacement to the replacement.
Or
Like,
or a system after September 2007.
well, I'm
Perm-
looking specifically at A3, and I'm questioning whether or not we need to say and replacement system.
Okay.
Yeah, I think striking what you struck there, Julie Beth, probably works well.
Okay.
Because if you have a system that isn't failed now, you can continue to
Yeah.
use it if you can demonstrate that you have a solution if it does fail.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so Emily, please delete the email I just sent you with this screenshot.
Sure.
Any thoughts or comments on A and B?
I think that's kind of what we'd been talking about. All right. And no variances or new encroachments. Okay, and this is just to highlight it, and I think, Linda, for whenever we do workshop this with the select board, I want to make sure, I want to sort of annotate the key pieces. This is the one that says there's no cost to connect when we're building this system. But after that, after the date of initial construction and operation, sorry. You got to build your building sewer. That's going to
And
be
just to follow up with our previous discussion, so if we contact some of these landowners that are on our to-do list to contact, and they do want to expand, and we're going to put in a larger septic tank than previously estimated, do we have enough funding for that to construct that, Peter, with our existing budget? If let's just say all the half dozen or so folks we contacted want to plan for increased uses than what we previously thought, do we have the budget to build those larger septic tanks?
I'm not super worried about that. I don't think we're talking about huge bumps if it's planned out in advance. I guess we'll, as we fine tune our cost estimate for the 30%, and then as we move forward, we'll kind of be evaluating that, but I'm not super worried about it.
Okay. And I know we were discussing the date at which we would, what would be the drop dead date for hooking up or not hooking up. If for some
That'll be
reason,
before the bid documents go out.
right, if for
wouldn't
some
be in the
reason, do we want to
ordinance.
bake in some flexibility in the future on that date if the construction is behind schedule, for example, and we have some late comers? Or
I wouldn't worry about putting that in the ordinance because this
Well,
is
it wouldn't go
this
in
is
the
if this gives you room, but select board and or if you've constituted your board of wastewater commissioners, they would be able to say by resolution, this is the date by which we need information.
okay.
I don't think you need to amend the ordinance to do that. All right. So then we've got connection required. This basically just goes back up to the discussion we had. C is important because if you get somebody who just has discharging sewage and refuses to do anything, or you've got somebody who's indigent and they can't do it, it gives the town authority to connect the system and put a lien on the property. Hopefully you'll never have to do it. All right. So here we go with our design flow basis. Now this is important because this is where we get the structure for charging fees. So what this now says, unless you're metering, we're going to use the Vermont rules to determine gallons per day. Except if you have dwelling units occupied by a single household unit within the service area, we're going to charge you based on gallons. And the kicker, how I decided to structure this was occupancy by a single household unit. Now, Seth and I are painfully aware that Vermont land use law defines household unit as a group of individuals functioning as a single unit for the purposes of finances, cooking, sleeping, and function. You don't get into who's related to whom, but so we're looking at single household units. What that means, this is new, is that if you subdivide a house into apartments, you're going to get a new allocated capacity based on bedrooms for each of those separate dwelling units. If you do an accessory dwelling unit, you're going to get a new allocation based on the number of bedrooms in the ADU. And if you decide to create a group home, a rooming house of some sort, or short-term rental, we're going to use the state rules to figure out your additional flow. And that's the best way I can come up with, right as of today, to figure out how we make sure that we don't have people skirting the rules and paying that flat fee when they're not really a house.
JB, can we,
Yep.
I love it. And it deals with some of the unfortunate contradictions and conflicts between different pieces of state statute. Could we just for 2, where we say subdivision of a residential structure into separate dwelling, you said require approval. Can we say the allocation for this, under this ordinance, so we don't potentially run into,
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Shall require sorry for the all caps, assignment of a separate allocated capacity there.
Yes.
And that way you do it through the zoning permit.
Exactly, right.
Yep. I feel that panic.
You saw the panic happening.
I knew exactly where, and then I was like, yep, I recognize that. Please excuse my dogs who are losing their minds in the background. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. So what that means is if somebody's going to do a short-term rental and, their cute little the she shed suddenly becomes a place for ski bums, they got to come in. And then you go to the state allocation for an extra bedroom and you charge them separately based on the gallons. And it shouldn't be a lot of money, but it prevents mischief, I think. Okay, so that's that. And then we get to, okay, this is all the same separate building sewers, blah, 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 blah. All right, town reserve capacity. Once we have the cleaned up numbers, Pete, and we've had a couple conversations with landowners, then we can figure out if we really want the town to create reserve capacity. Because basically otherwise it's first come, first served. We're going to have a form for reserving capacity.
Julie Beth, is it your opinion that the town would then have to pay for that capacity to reserve it, or not necessarily? Can they decide to reserve it and not pay for it?
I mean, we've got to figure out what the denominator looks like.
Yeah.
I don't think the town has to pay for it, but we're gonna have to say what the town will be doing.
Right.
Um, I, having spent most of 2024 dealing with sewer rates, it's a 50-50 split whether communities put the cost of create their per gallon charge based on the total capacity of the system versus the actual allocated capacity. It just depends on the situation. All right. So, okay. I do want to highlight, we talked a lot about this last time, and this is the kind of stuff that select board really will need some time to chew over. That if you get a final capacity allocation, as in you're good to connect tomorrow, you start paying the sewer use fees. Given the amount of extra capacity you're going to have, at least in the first few years, I doubt a lot of people are going to hold final capacity or feel the need to do that unless they're actually pulling the zoning permit at the same time. But if people actually hold that capacity, if they've paid, you want people to have paid for it, so they don't say, oh, I'm going to tie up the capacity, and then they don't do anything. Because you want to make sure they're paying if it's final. The preliminary approval is intended to be sufficient certainty that they can go to Act 250. So we can go through that next time. I didn't change anything in there. It's just, that's what that is. Now, we did talk a little bit, and Tori, thanks for the follow-up email about the financial hardship. So payment of fees to reserve capacity, the board would be possibly allowed to modify, extend, or waive if the applicant demonstrates an inability to pay due to circumstances beyond the applicant's control, such as, but not limited to, extended period of appeals of development approvals or impacts of a natural disaster. So those, say somebody, God forbid, they've got their preliminary capacity allocation, then they get their final, and then there's a fire in the building. And it's going to be like an extended period, and you don't want them to have to pay the sewer charges. You'd be able to waive that here. That's the kind of situation. So, Jim and Linda, does that feel better? Like a little bit more parameters?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, subdivisions, that's statutory language. So here we go with fun with sewer use charges. All right, the board has the authority to establish charges, and it is to provide adequate revenue to cover the cost of construction, operation, and maintenance. You have to be related to the cost of service. No Vegas junkets may be added to the cost. All right. The board can also establish fees. So you've got use charges, which is your gallons, and you've got fees, which is like application fees, connection fees. And they will be adopted by resolution of the board and adjusted annually. And they can also be adjusted, and fees you can adjust whenever you feel like it, but your use charges you're going to look at every year. That's, for a system this small, that's probably recommended. You might not change them, but you're at least going to revisit them annually. Big systems, never less than like 3 to 5 years. The system, just look at it every year. Say, what are we doing with our budgets, and what do we want to do? Okay. Sewer connection fees. It's 5 years from now. The system's operating. Someone comes in with a cool new project, and they need to pay a connection fee. Say it's affordable housing or some kind of supportive housing or some civic project that we haven't even thought of. This C gives the board authority to reduce or waive the connection fee for affordable housing and other use. And I added this, including consideration of such factors as the amount of fee waiver or reduction requested, the fiscal benefit to the town of the project, and the project's consistency with the town plan. Now, your sewer connection fee is going to be 4 figures at the most. Some places charge like $2,000 to connect to the system. Maybe it's even less. It could, if you've got, say, a community benefit use, a new martial arts facility that's going to be run for the kids, maybe they ask to have their $2,000 connection fee waived. This would be where the board would have that authority to consider that. And you don't have to say yes.
So, Linda, would this be, should we mention the new village nonprofit organization here that you were just discussing earlier?
I think a use for which the board determines that a reduction is in the public interest. Well, they'd be connected anyway because it's a town building. But
Well,
if
no,
you
this
had
this
yeah.
village organization is not just municipal buildings,
Yeah,
is my understanding.
they would go under here. You'd
Okay.
look at it and say, okay, it's in the public interest to waive this in order to further the thing. It's consistent with our town plan. The end.
We don't need to call them out specifically.
No.
No.
In
Okay.
fact, I would recommend you not.
Okay. Linda, what do you think about 2C?
Yeah, it just gives the board the authority. I hope they don't use it too often.
Well, remember, it's the connection fee,
Yeah.
not the ongoing charge.
Oh,
It's just for connection.
right.
Where this became materially important, so South Burlington, connection fee in 2002 was like $2,300 per unit. Cathedral Square comes in for the stuff on Farrell Street, and they're doing 90 units at $2,300 each. That was where it was like materially beneficial to their pro forma to not have to pay all of that connection fee. It was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here, it's more like a good faith gesture by the town rather than something that's really going to affect. But if you've got a nonprofit and it's $2,000 they don't have to spend on connection, it's
Yeah.
sort of like a good faith thing.
So this connection fee, where is it landing? I mean, is it the cost of doing business?
It is a cost of doing
connecting?
business. When we get closer to construction, this is something your board of wastewater commissioners will talk about. Okay, what's going to be the cost to the town of the easement? Your road superintendent checking out the right of way, making sure it's not messed up, bringing Pete or another engineer out to supervise the connection and inspect it. You basically want to cover your costs.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly recover a little bit of the cost of all of this wonderful grief and time that you've put in getting the system built. So it's more like a cost recovery fee for the town.
Mhm.
Again, in big systems, it tends to be a whole lot more per unit. And then you do 90 units and it's a big number. And city council might reduce that to further the affordable housing.
Yeah.
So.
So I think, when connections are happening, you'll be having expenses to the town for just managing all the stuff that has to happen. You're also going to have just the ability to use that connection fee to recoup some of the carrying cost that the town has done. It has to go to the system. It doesn't go into the general
Correct.
fund. But
Nope.
Depending on how you decide to set it, it could be a way you offset, potentially the cost of long-term capital, needs, for example, or one thing it could be used for in addition to just the cost of doing business of the connection. I think, an example that could come up, and I know the habitat lot is outside of the service area, but if something similar to happen inside the service area,
Yeah.
there's a ratio of every $4,000 of expense impacts about by $1,000 the income needed to afford. So it's not a meaningless reduction for
Yes.
somebody who's maybe on the edge of being able to afford, purchasing a home, in especially a first-time home buyer or a
Yeah.
senior stepping down or someone moving out of a floodplain situation. So I think it's a it for something like that, it could be meaningful impact while not having a huge impact on the overall operations of the system if you're providing these kinds of clear controls and clear expectations of why you'd be granting it.
That's a perfect example. Something like Habitat, if they were able to do a couple of duplexes, it really could make it, in a case like that, it really might make a difference. And it's not wrong for the town to recover some cost, but it's also not wrong to have that ability to balance that against the public interest. All right. So anything else on that one? Okay. All right, brace yourselves. Determination of sewer use charge. So what this is intended to do is not say how much the rate is per year. That gets set by resolution of your board. But how are we going to figure out how much we're charging everybody? So A says the board will impose a charge per individually occupied residential dwelling unit. And then for all other users, per gallon of allocated capacity. So if you have a dwelling unit occupied by one household, they get a charge per unit. Everybody else, all other users, it's per gallon of allocated capacity. Flat charge. Each dwelling unit authorized for occupancy by a single household shall be charged a flat rate per month based on the number of bedrooms as set forth in our little table. The flat charge will be determined annually by the board in conjunction with establishing its sewer use charge. So every year you're going to say, okay, this is the rate per studio or one bedroom. This is the rate per two bedroom. This is the rate per three bedroom. Okay. For everything else, the sewer use charge is going to be based on an estimate of the total annual cost to operate and maintain, which will include but not be limited to contract operations, permit compliance, regular maintenance, utilities, materials inspections, legal and professional services, and any costs related to indebtedness. God forbid there's some problem or there's an ability to extend the system. You take out a 5-year revenue anticipation note. You can charge that back against the annual rate. So any indebtedness that you incur for the system can be charged towards the rate. Right now, you don't have any. If you did something like revenue anticipation, you could do that here. 2 is important. This is how I've drafted it. If a dedicated fund, meaning your reserve fund, has been established, the board may at its discretion allocate all or a portion of that annual contribution to the estimated cost on which the use charge is based. So what I'm giving you, the town, is the option to charge that revenue, that dedicated fund, to the user rate or not. Meaning you could simply make it an annual budget allocation of the town on the grand list. Or you can allocate it to the sewer use charge. Because I think at least in early years, it may be kind of, it's going to be one way to not have a super high per gallon charge on your non-residential users.
Are you saying just putting the entire reserve the O and M cost are on the grand list?
No, not the O and M cost.
The
This is just the reserve fund.
the reserve, oh, yeah.
Yep. There are plenty of purposes, including infrastructure, for which select boards set up reserve funds. Don't get me started on how many the town of Warren used to have. But what this is saying is you can either allocate that appropriation to the sewer charge or in whole or in part or not. So that's going to be, let's see where we end up with numbers. But that would be the allowance that you don't have to charge the whole reserve, annual reserve to the sewer charge.
Is a dedicated fund another word for reserve fund?
Correct. That is what it's called in statute. Please don't ask me why.
Can we just put in parentheses reserve fund there, JB?
Is that something that's gonna
Or
need to be
above
done, through the sewer board or through the town voters?
I have it done through written policy adopted by the board, which is what has been handed down to me on stone tablets from Stitzel, Page, and Fletcher.
Okay, I just wanna know, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you could certainly have the select board be the authorities of that. But that's okay. So 3 is where we do all of our math. A sewer use charge per gallon of allocated capacity. So this is what we charge everybody but the individual dwelling units. It'll be the total estimated cost of operating the system and, if desired, all or part of the reserve fund. Because we take that total cost per year. Then we subtract what you're going to get in your flat fee from the residential users. And then we're going to divide, as I've drafted it now, divide by the total number of gallons of permitted capacity. If, depending on how the numbers look, you might want to only divide that by the number of allocated, with the remainder being paid by the town. But let's see how this would be the cleanest way to do it. So okay, so again, we take the operating cost plus maybe plus some reserve cost. We subtract what we know we're going to get from our residential users, and we divide the remaining amount that we have to fund by the number of permitted gallons. And that's the charge per gallon. So then the store today, you'd multiply that resulting charge by 217, divided by 12 is their monthly charge. So however it ultimately shakes out, this is where we're going to say this is how our board will do the math of setting our rates.
You were gonna say something, Peter?
I was just curious, like what scenario we'd be able to divide by the total permitted capacity starting off. It just seems like, because there's going to be 10,000 gallons per
That's
day.
residential
What's that?
or excess. Yeah, I don't know.
The
I
excess.
don't know today what the right denominator is here.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough.
we can, once we have the spreadsheet, we can run each of those and see what makes the most sense for equity and cost. But that's where we're going to make that decision. And I'm going to put a box in here. Bloop. Say. Okay. There we go. Okay. So then we've got periodic adjustment by the board. If there's a goof, you do it whenever you need to do it. This is your reserve fund. And again, it's up to 15 by statute, it's up to 15% of your annual cost. And you can only withdraw from that. No Vegas junkets, only for paying major rehabilitation, maintenance, or upgrade expenditures for which it's established. Sewer use charges are applicable to everybody. And then this is also where, based on what happens above, we decide, we spell out what the town is responsible to pay. And we spell town correctly. Okay, so that's a little bit TBD. Surcharge high strength waste. Again, if somebody comes in with a distillery, we'll figure that out. Excess revenues, that is up to the board. We're not going to do a capital construction charge. Excess revenues may be put into the dedicated fund or otherwise applied to reduce the use charge. Billing frequency, Linda, all of this is stuff that I would like to make sure you and your clerk really go through. And I mean, I've simply stuck to the basics here, but if you want to make any changes on penalty, frequency, that's all up to you. That's really what works for the town. You prorate sewer use charges. If somebody connects on the 15th of the month, they pay half the bill, half the month's charge. Okay, that's it. Use the public sewer. Don't put paint down the drain. Don't do dumb things. Service area, and then these will be, you're going to just be the schedule of charges and fees that your board adopts annually. Okay, we made it. Page 35. And then I made a little reference thingy.
JB, can we go back to your original
Of course.
spreadsheet?
Yes, indeed. Let me get this closed out. Come on. Okay, here we go. Nope. I'm just going to move this out. Oh. Okay. All right. So I think that's kind of all I've got on the ordinance. It seems like that's tracking with what we talked about last time. Great.
Yeah.
All right. So next up, I think, is really to update this, Pete, when we can get some numbers, and then
JB, can you go to your
yeah,
original the spreadsheet?
this is, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not screen sharing. That would be helpful. Bloop. There we go.
Okay. So we haven't, when do we need to make a decision on which rate option?
I think, well, the way the ordinance is drafted right now, we need to pick sort of a denominator for determining this, the rate per gallon. And that, I think probably we need better number. We need to have accurate numbers, and we need to walk the select board through the options. Right now, you know, I don't even want to say, I feel so uncomfortable with like what our estimate is for commercial flows and such. It's hard to say. But Linda, depending on what you feel was really represented to the voters, these options, which may be conservative, were under $40 a year for $300,000 of assessed value. Even with the flat rate at 40 or and 25 for an apartment.
Well, JB, who's going to make this decision though? Is as
Select
far as
board
which
has to make
rate is
that
the
decision.
select board or is it the
Select board
sewer
has to make that
commission?
decision.
Okay.
They need to set how do you set the rate by ordinance? Then the board basically carries it out.
Should the commission make a recommendation to the select board or
I think that'd be great, but we need numbers first.
Okay. And when would we have those numbers?
I'm looking at Pete. Yes.
I have the numbers. I can share them
Okay.
right now if we want to go over them. It's just, it gets pretty complicated when we have
Yeah.
a lot of no's, a lot of maybe no's, and the only ones we know we can take off are the buyouts, like.
Yep.
Right.
I think,
So it's,
Pete, you and I need to do a worst case and
yeah,
a best case.
yeah, right.
But I mean, we're not going to know about the no's or the opt-outs until whenever our deadline is that we set at our last meeting, which was
Well,
this fall, right?
I guess that's what I'm trying to say is there's a lot to figure out still in terms of who wants what and how much capacity everyone's going to kind of go for,
But
right?
this is part of the ordinance though,
No,
right?
no, no.
Okay.
The ordinance is just telling
But
the
the
sewer
denominator,
commissioners how they go about, how they can, the authority they have to charge fees.
Correct.
But
but
it doesn't
the
say what the
denominator,
fee is.
the denominator question though is part of the ordinance, isn't it?
It is. It is. So we want to know a worst case and a best case. And then it's about what do we feel is going to be fair, because you can change the ordinance. You can, if everybody opted in and you were going to have lots of money from the residential, and maybe you could give the commercial a little bit of a break. You've got time to figure that out.
So I guess what I'm asking is, we don't need to determine the denominator question before the ordinance is finalized.
Yes, you do, but you'll need to, the select board will need to make a decision on that of how do we want to set our rate to finalize and adopt the ordinance. What I'm saying is, if, say they adopt the ordinance in June of this year, And by June of 26, it's apparent that everybody's connecting and we're going to be overcharging commercial, select board amends it. You're in a weird situation with such a small system and so many unknowns. I think it would be best to go into this saying we're going to do our level best to make the best estimate we can, but we may have to change it depending on how many people connect.
Okay, so back to what you're saying, JB, that you and Peter are going to come up with a best
We-
case, worst case before
Right.
before the February meeting, select board meeting?
Oh, goodness, yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think as Pete, if we could do it like next week,
yeah, for sure.
okay.
yeah,
I think it's mostly us working with what we've already pulled together and make sure it's in a
Yeah.
format that works for you, Julie Beth, and maybe talking about some of the
Yeah.
nuances.
And then, the folks that are gonna talk to some of the commercial users that we just discussed on the to-do list. So having those, maybe we'll get some of those answers, and then you'll have your best case, worst case by next week.
I'd like to.
Yep.
Linda, Allen, how are you feeling about this from a select board perspective?
Good. It's hard to know how the rest of them will feel. In the ordinance, it doesn't spell out what the fines are. It just refers to the title.
The fines
Yeah,
for
violation.
fines for violation. The wastewater board sets those by resolution. I would suggest we look at what, for example, Morrisville, but no, generally speaking, unless you want to put it in the ordinance, generally speaking, your Board of Sewer Commissioners of whatever form, they make an annual schedule, or every 3 years they set a schedule of fees.
Well, I thought it was defined in statute that it was like $100 up to $500 per.
It's like, yeah, it's an up
Per-
to, but then other places do.
And if you pay it off, if you say you're guilty and you pay it, it's reduced. I didn't know you had a choice. To me, it's pretty low.
Is there anything else, JB, that we need to go over?
Nope.
So how does this leave us with, so we're gonna get some answers for next Tuesday when we get together again, and you're available for that, JB, next Tuesday? F5.
Yes. Yes, thank God I'm only next quarter.
And then, so we'll try to come up with the best case, worst case denominator
Yep.
and talking to various landowners by then for our homework assignment and yeah, so I think we're good, right? I think we're good, everybody. Do we
Yeah.
need to cover anything
Linda,
else?
the only other thing I'd like to think about, Linda, is if you want to, select board meets Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
if we maybe think about, I do think some kind of in-person work session on the ordinance would be a really good idea. If I'm going to do that, and I'm happy to, I've got a couple of landmines in my calendar that I'd need to work around with you.
Well, I was thinking the 22nd, but they might not want to meet every Wednesday.
Okay.
in a row, so it might be the 29th.
I
That's,
can't do in person on the 29th, unfortunately.
all right.
I could, if there's another, they're pretty much all about Wednesdays?
Well, that seems to be a good day, but I'll ask.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm gonna be out of town till the 26th. I don't need to be there. Is it more important to have JB and Peter there?
It'd be a good idea, Jim, just because I think continuity with the committee is helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
Seth, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I could do the last week of January.
27, 28 is great. I have to be physically
I won't be
here.
here. 28th is planning commission. I know.
Oof. Okay. Uh,
30th?
again, that's where we have the national homelessness point in time count. I got to be out in the river at 4 a.m.
No, Tuesday and Thursday that week, I'm not free. The 27th I am.
Is that a
That would be
possibility?
fine. That works great.
I'll ask them.
Okay.
Right. I'm gonna be back from vacation, and probably not thinking about wastewater too much while I'm gone, so.
We could also the the third Monday the 3rd, if that makes any sense. So it's
That-
before the meeting.
And the select board would have to meet twice in 1 week, though.
They'd probably think that was a really
Yeah.
bad idea.
Yeah, we can
Well,
go with,
I'll throw it out to them.
we
Okay.
can have the 27th as. Yeah,
I have a question for Emily and Tori.
looks like
before we
Tori's,
leave.
did Tori leave?
No, she's here.
Oh, there she is. Okay,
Oh,
sorry.
I'm lurking.
Not related to wastewater, but I received an email about a financial report for FEMA Go federal grant. It's due the end of the month. Does anyone know what that's for?
That is probably for the brick grant for Flatiron Road. So we should circle back with Alec on that. He's
But we haven't gotten it. I don't know. It's like I got 2 emails to fill in this financial report by the end of the year and January. And I have
Um,
no idea what it's about.
Linda, you can forward that to me and I can try to decipher that.
Okay.
Then if it's not related to the brick.
As far as I know, we're still waiting to hear on the brick.
Yeah, I know they've allocated but not awarded because FEMA is like that. So
Yeah, like 3 of my buyouts
yeah.
that people are screaming. Okay, thank you for your help.
No problem.
Okay, folks, so we're gonna meet again next Tuesday at 5, and we'll have an in-person option. Glad it was Zoom today with the weather. Having a little bit of a snowstorm here, JB.
Can I ask a question? How did it work when you guys were in person reviewing on the screen when Julie Beth was presenting stuff? That seemed to work okay. I'm mostly asking because I have a meeting, I think that goes from like 3 to 5. So it might be hard for me to be in person, but I was actually thinking being able to point and flip through pages on the screen might be easier for me anyway.
I have absolutely no problem when people attend by Zoom. Actually, you're really looking at there and you can see what's, what you're presenting better than if someone sits across the room. And
Yeah. Okay, that's what I was wondering.
I have no, if anyone wants to, always, you can come by Zoom, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good, Peter. And so a question for either Seth, Emily, or Tori. Seth and Tori, I don't know if are you both going to the meeting tomorrow?
I am, yep.
Okay, and maybe it's a question for Emily. I just got an email from Lynette and it says what to bring. I guess it says optional, background or draft / working documents, plans, schematics, maps, photos for your town project, resources, examples, materials to share with other towns, and a notebook or tablet or laptop for taking notes.
Laptop. If you have a laptop with your stuff on it, that should be fine.
Okay,
So,
I'm just wondering if,
so the
sorry.
format, so like the towns will be together. Tori is going to be with you guys as your, the planning commission, the person that's working with you. Seth's more in the resource category tomorrow. They haven't heard a whole lot yet about what's kind of going on, but just, if you bring your laptop, you should be fine. We have something you guys are going to work on. That's something we hope you guys kind of find fun, but also very helpful. About it's not just about what you guys are in a kind of a good starting position, but there's a lot of other pieces that have to get in place around creating this utility. So we'll be talking about some TMF capacity tomorrow and some other things. So it should be good. It should be a good time.
So Emily, does only one of us in the Wolcott group have to bring all of these materials, or we all need to have them
No,
loaded?
I think if you guys coordinated and brought, like one of you brought your laptop or tablet, whatever you guys use, you should be good.
Okay, because I have some of my stuff in paper, some electronic, but
No, I appreciate it. I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would mostly just bring like a tablet or a laptop with you. You should be
Okay.
fine. So,
and
yeah,
Tori, you will have that stuff with you in case we need something on your computer.
I can be the tech wizard, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, we're hoping you guys find this beneficial. Seth's been in some of the planning meetings, so at the beginning. So, right, Seth, I think. Pretty
Mhm.
sure. Yeah, we're excited. So it'll be a good
All
time.
right.
So, yeah, great.
All
You
right,
guys
well,
are doing really great job. Just keep up the great work. You guys are doing a really good job. So,
Thank you.
thank you for that, Emily. Everyone's doing a lot of great work here. Okay, I think that's it, folks. We will adjourn.
See you Tuesday.
And we'll see some of you tomorrow, and we'll see the rest of you on Tuesday. All right, thank you.
Bye.
bye.
Bye, everybody.